On February 27, 1997, the world and the world's media went absolutely crazy when it was announced that a lamb named Dolly had been cloned in Scotland. I'm Gregory Pence. I'm a bioethicist, which I've been for about 50 years, and this is Great Stories in Bioethics, my personal channel. I'm always speaking for myself, and of course not for UAB. In this story, I want to tell you not only about how the world went crazy about cloning, but my own testimony before Congress about cloning and how it had a lot of surprises. At least for me, I was surprised. A little bit of context. Virtually every novel and science fiction movie that had ever described cloning described it in a bad way. The beings originated by cloning were zombies or slaves or replicants. They were bad in some ways. The idea that humans might be cloned was quickly floated. There was a universal yuck reaction. I was a kind of bioethics iconoclast. Because of my experience with Louise Brown and in vitro fertilization, I was very skeptical of all the alarmism about a new way of originating a human baby. With some prodding from James Rachel's, I wrote a book called Who's Afraid of Human Cloning, which was the only book that out there that could say anything good about human cloning. The media focus on cloning was like anything the world has ever seen. And because reporters needed both sides, virtually every day when I went into my office, there was a message for some reporter or journalists wanting to know about the secret cloning labs and which doctors were trying to clone a baby, all of which didn't exist, but it was an interesting, intense time. That eventually led to a call in March of 2001 by a lawyer who was working for Congress, inviting me to testify before Congress. Congress was about to pass, and they were debating, what I thought was a really bad bill. It would criminalize not only reproductive cloning, but also embryonic cloning. You could not even create an embryo up to 14 days by cloning. I initially was flattered. I thought I would go, but then he explained I would have to pay my own airfare and hotel. And I said, wow, that doesn't really seem fair. I'm working for the government. It's not even paying my way to Washington. But I went home and my mother and my wife said, oh, no, you got to go. How many academics get to testify before Congress? And the philosophy department agreed to pay. And I thought, well, I could stay with my mother. She was a widow, about 80, living in my old home in Glenmont, the last line on the red metro line going north. So I said, okay, I'll go. The lawyer explained that I needed to send them the next day 50 copies of my remarks verbatim, and that I could not deviate from those remarks. I typed them up that night, and let's say I typed it very carefully, knowing I would be on national TV saying it. That was kind of a surprise. Those were little surprises. Next surprise to me personally happened as I got up the morning to get on the plane. I came down the worst case of flu I have ever had. I just knew I couldn't go. And again, my mother and wife said, you have to go, you have to get it out. Get some medicine, get it out. So I did. By the time I landed in Reagan Airport, both my eustachian tubes had closed. I got on the metro to go up to my mother's and I was half asleep. My mother, the eternal optimist, said, here's some chicken soup, take some more decongestants, go to sleep, I'll get you up in the morning. Because of all the media attention, various national news groups had booked me. CBS The Morning Show said they wanted me to speak live in the morning. At 6:30 a.m., stretched limo pulled up in front of our modest house in Glenmont. Just for the bragging rights this gave my mother, it made my trip worthwhile because all the neighbors were out wondering what was going on. I was taken down to K Street where the CBS studio was, and a perky intern led me into a very tiny room, like a big walk-in closet that was dimly lit. And this was my next surprise because I thought, well, I knew the show originated in New York City, but I at least figured I'd be at a studio in DC with a real person. Nope. The cameraman said, hey, the lights are going to go dark in a minute. You'll just see a little red light. I'm putting an earpiece in your ear. Don't look at the red light or you'll look shifty-eyed. What happened is, in a few minutes, I heard Russ Mitchell in my ear. I had to pretend like I was looking at him. And for about 90 seconds, I explained why I thought we should not make it a federal crime to develop an embryo by cloning, that we should never take a reproductive tool off the table. That lasted very, very quickly. The next thing I know, the lights went on. The next thing after that, I was out on K Street on a brisk March morning, and the limo driver said, where do you want to go? I didn't have to be at ABC Radio and talk to Sam Donaldson until noon, so I said, take me back to Glenmont, which he did. When I got back to Glenmont, about 8:15, my mother said, hey, you were great. And I said, I have to go back to sleep. She said, okay, I'll wake you up. I went back to sleep, and at 11 a.m., a different limo, this time from ABC, pulled up. It took me down to the ABC studio near the Mayflower Hotel on Connecticut Avenue. At this point, another surprise happened. Before me, Donna Shalala had been talking to Sam Donaldson, the outgoing Secretary of Health and Human Services under President Bush and the future president of the University of Miami. I listened to her. She didn't seem to mind that I was in the room. And I heard her say to someone, tell President Bush that Congress won't accept this legislation until the unions make a concession first. She soon left. The intern came in and they put some headsets on me into a room with an interviewing table. I assumed that Sam Donaldson would soon be there. Nope, another surprise. She said, well, Sam Donaldson's upstairs. Just pretend like you're talking and he's right in front of you. Sam lobbed me some questions. I explained that I didn't know any scientist or doctor who was planning to clone a baby, that all the ones that claimed that were fakes. But as far as I knew, Sam was in Australia. Again, that lasted about 2 minutes. And next thing I knew, I was out on Connecticut Avenue. The limo took me over to the Rayburn Congressional Office Building near the Capitol. At the Rayburn Building, I had to go through many security checks, after which I walked down a long corridor. At one point, I glanced to my left, and I saw a hearing said nuclear waste disposal, and I heard them discussing where they could get rid of 50 tons of nuclear waste. There's one congressman and one lobbyist, no reporters. That was it. So the next surprise was that nothing prepared me for what was at the end of that hall. It was the Sam Irwin room, a huge room where the Watergate hearings had occurred. It was absolutely packed, hundreds and hundreds of people, dozens of TV and print journalists. The congressmen were up on a dais, about 20 of them above us. An R2-D2 CNN camera was robotically going back and forth, filming everything live. The panelists were at a table up front, in front of all the seated people. I was completely shocked. It looked like Carnival in Rio. The congressmen were kind of snickering and joking, not taking it very seriously, and perhaps with good reason. Some of the people invited were really kooks. There was a former race car driver named Rael who liked to have his followers exercise in the nude, and he had claimed that he and his followers were going to clone a baby in the Cayman Islands. He came in a long silk rainbow robe and a top knot. There was a guy named Pavarotti Zavos, a veterinarian who was an expert with turkey sperm, but he claimed he was going to clone a baby. A physicist named Dick Seed, real name, said he was going to clone himself. A lot of people were invited who really got the media's attention. And I had actually asked the lawyer for Congress not to invite these people because I thought it made a joke. Another surprise, I didn't realize that without all these people that were kind of crazy and kooky, all the media wouldn't come and give it all the attention. I think the Congressional Committee knew what it was doing because they all wanted to be on TV. So at the hearing, I sat, I thought, on the rational side of the table. Kooks were sort of on the other side. Sat next to Art Kaplan, the bioethicist, and the deputy director of the FDA. I ended up, in my testimony, contradicting the deputy director. He said that the FDA could regulate human cloning. I pointed out that the FDA's mandate legally was only to regulate devices or drugs, and that a child originated by cloning was neither a device nor a drug. I also argued that we should never take a tool off the table for creating humans, that Congress had, in its wisdom, banned federal funding for IVF and assisted reproduction research, and that is not really a good thing. It did not really help infertile couples. I argued there might be extreme circumstances where a couple was infertile but wanted a genetic connection to their child. Maybe their ancestry had been in existence for 2,000 years. You just never knew. And especially the idea of making it a federal crime to originate an embryo by cloning or a child seemed to me to be taking a sledgehammer to kill a gnat, and a gnat that didn't even really exist, because nobody I knew was really trying to clone a human baby. I also tried to counter some of the ridiculous things that were being said about cloning, almost all of which were political and social and psychological. A lot of people just assumed that a being originated by cloning would be a zombie or a slave or somehow some human. We had been conditioned this way by science fiction and novels and movies, and that the scientists who created this would all be arrogant and evil, kind of like the boys from Brazil or are naive like Jurassic Park. One of the more ridiculous claims was by an intellectual named Francis Fukuyama, who claimed that if a husband cloned the cells of his beautiful wife, and the girl, raised the girl, that when she was later an adolescent, he might be attracted to her, the child, and do as he was to the wife originally, and do bad things. And the assumption was that because she was originated by cloning, she would be somehow subhuman and subjected to exploitation in a way that normal girls weren't. I thought that was ridiculous. Just like a child who was originated when her parents aren't married or from different races, people always, or by IVF, predicted that they might be treated badly, but they just became regular children. It didn't really matter because I don't think the congressmen, most of them even listened to me. The only two that seemed to have a brain were James Greenwood and a woman named Diana DeJet, Colorado. They seemed to have done their homework. They asked very intelligent questions. I was happy to be with them. I was sick, but the intensity of the whole thing really hit my adrenaline. I rose to the occasion. I managed to last for 4 hours. About sunset, it was over. I found myself into the Washington Mall, looking down towards the Lincoln Memorial. I knew my way around because I had grown up in D.C., so I went over to Union Station, which I knew was near CNN headquarters. I got a Coke and Union Station. About 20 minutes later, went into the CNN building, went through security, went up to talk to Wolf Blitzer and Greta von Susteren. Then I got another surprise. We watched the national news feed, and we saw a White House spokesman come out on the White House lawn and say that President Bush feels that Congress won't accept this legislation until the unions make a concession first. Exactly what Donna Shalala had told him to say. Another surprise was that Greta von Susteren was sitting at a table. She had a very nice blazer, coiffed hair above, but below she was wearing kind of shorty shorts and sandals, a lot of leg exposed, which kind of threw me. When she saw that I was surprised, she said, "Oh, everybody does it. We're just trying to be comfortable." So she lobbed me a few questions, and again I explained why I thought this was overkill, trying to prevent scientists from doing something they didn't want to do. It was way too emotional, that we had made federal laws banning certain things in the past that we regretted, and this was way too early. I was happy that eventually Congress did not ban embryonic reproductive cloning, and the whole bill kind of stalled on that. They were quite willing to ban reproductive cloning, but they had put them together, and that really kind of killed the whole bill. So it never actually became a federal crime. So after CNN, I kind of staggered downstairs. The CNN limo asked me where I wanted to go, and I said back to Glenmont. I almost immediately passed out. I got home. My mother was wildly enthusiastic. She thought I had done great. She hugged me. I immediately went to sleep. When I woke up the next day, it all seemed like a dream. Looking back, it still seems like a dream. When I got back, some physicians really questioned why I had defended human cloning, and they felt like you should be safe and not do anything so controversial. I don't regret doing so. I think all the things I said were true and valid. It was really a great experience for me, even though it took me a week or two to recover from this incredible case of flu and from the intensity of this trip. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, give me a thumbs up, subscribe. That's it for today.